Good morning, everyone. Here we are, another wonderful opportunity we have to get our dose of God's Word to get our day kicked off right. This morning, I want to look at something for us to think about, and that is this. Does God really care what we do? Does God really care how we do it? We can look at it in the religious world, and the obvious answer to that would certainly be no. How many times maybe have you said, God just doesn't care. God knows what's in my heart. He doesn't care. If I use a guitar, or, to worship Him or whatever. Right? God doesn't care. But is that true? I think we have a wonderful example that that's just not true from the Bible. Go back to 2 Samuel chapter 6. There was this old boy named Uzzah. He was a friend of David. And this was some pretty touchy times, with Israel at this time. And they were getting ready to move the Ark of the Covenant. Now, we're going to see here in just a moment that there was very specific directions on who and how the Ark of the Covenant was to be made. We go way back. We don't have time. We can go back into Exodus where they were building the things for the tabernacle. And the Ark of the Covenant had 6 rings on it, 3 on each side, and there were supposed to be poles made out of acacia wood to go through those rings. And the Levites were to carry it. Now, even within the divisions of the Levitical tribe, certain families had certain things to do, and they were prohibited from doing other things. For example, in Numbers chapter 4 and in verse 15, it tells us that the sons of Kohath were the ones that were to move the articles. Now, another aspect of the Levitical priesthood were to pack things up, but they couldn't carry them. Just like the Kohathites, they couldn't pack the stuff up, but they were to carry those items and articles in the Ark of the Covenant. But let's get back to Uzzah. Let's notice what is taking place here. We're going to start back in verse 3. That's going to be 2 Samuel chapter 6. We're going to start in verse 3. It says, "So they set the ark of God on a new cart and brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. And Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, drove the new cart. And they brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill, accompanying the ark of God, and Ahio went before the ark. Then David and all the house of Israel played music before the Lord on all kinds of instruments, of fir wood and harps, and stringed instruments and tambourines, on sistrums, and on cymbals." So things are just going, they're just having a great time. They're worshiping God, they're praising God, they're dancing, they're playing music, they're doing all these things, just honoring God, in the moment. So God must have been very appreciative of that, right? Let's read on. "And when they came to Nashon's threshing floor, Uzzah put out his hand to the ark of God and took hold of it, for the oxen stumbled." Well, who could be upset with that? God's certainly not going to have a problem with that, right? I mean, here he is, Ark of the Covenant. It's got the 10 Commandments in there. It's got the tablets. It's got Aaron's rod that butter. It's got the manna in there. So it was a very costly. It's overlaid with gold and got the cherubim on top. We've got to protect this thing. So here first of all, they're moving it the wrong way. They didn't go back to the book to find out how it is that God exactly wanted these things done. So they're just kind of doing what they want. They're going down the way. They're on the hill. The ox stumble, and the Ark of the Covenant, this beautiful box, this much real reverent box, it's about to fall off. So what does Uzzah do? He sticks his hand out to keep that thing from falling off and busting into a million pieces. Certainly, God's not going to have a problem with that. God would most certainly commend Uzzah for doing such a thing. Let's see what happens. Verse 7. "Then the anger of the Lord was aroused against Uzzah, and God struck him there for his error And he died there by the ark of God. Oh my. Goes back to our question. Does God care what we do and how we do it? The answer to that is yes. Here in verse 7, this word err also has irreverence. Irreverence. So think about it. When we're not doing things God's way, we're irreverent towards God. I've had people, about the topic of musical instruments, I've had people say, well, I just don't see where God's going to have a problem if I want to use a guitar to worship God. I just don't see where God's going to would have a problem with drums and light shows and all the things that make up worship today. I just don't see. Well, that's the problem, because we're thinking of David didn't see a problem with moving the Ark of the Covenant on it this way. Uzzah and Ahio, Benadab, they didn't have a problem with moving the Ark this way. The masses, they didn't see a problem with moving the Ark this way. They're singing and dancing and worshiping God and all this stuff. So everybody involved didn't have a single problem with moving the Ark of the Covenant this way, except God. God had a problem with it. And God had a problem with Uzzah putting his hand out to keep the Ark of the Covenant from falling off the cart. You see, God does care what we do. And there are prescribed and very specific ways of everything that is to be done when it comes to God. This is probably an example, part of the Bible you may have never even knew was in there. Your preacher's not going to preach on it because of the lesson that it teaches. God cares what we do and how we do it. If he didn't, he wouldn't tell us how to do things. Here's a very powerful lesson that we find. And so verse 8, and David became angry because of the Lord's outbreak against Uzzah. So now David's mad at God. And he called the name of the place Perez Uzzah to this day. David was afraid of the Lord that day, and he said, how can the ark of the Lord come to me? The answer to that? Go back to the book. Go back to the book. Here we have everybody involved had no problem with how this was being done except God. God had a problem with it. And God held Uzzah accountable when he did what he said don't do. You see, even the Kohathites, they couldn't touch the items. They could only move the items. You see, God is very specific in his commands. So, does God care what we do? Does he care how we do it? I suggest you have a little talk with old boy Uzzah and see what he tells you about the things pertaining to God. There's your dose of God's Word today. I hope it'll get your wheels turning. I hope it'll do you some good. And I hope it will get you to come to see and appreciate and reverent God. Now, what we do is either accepted or it's not accepted by God. And the only way to know that is back to the book. It's back to the book. Hey, hope you all have a great day. Lord willing, we'll get back tomorrow and we'll get us another dose of God's Word. We'll see you then.